What happens when Hollywood's most beloved late-night host decides to dig into the controversial past of one of the world's most polarizing royal figures? You won't believe what unfolds when Jimmy Kimmel sits down with Meghan Markle for what was supposed to be a lighthearted promotional interview, only to witness one of the most shocking confrontations in late-night television history. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds when the gloves come off and the real Meghan Markle emerges from behind her carefully crafted public persona. Last night's episode of Jimmy Kimmel Live started like any other promotional appearance. The audience was buzzing with excitement as Meghan Markle walked onto the stage, radiating her signature charm and that practiced smile we've all come to know. She was there to promote her latest Netflix documentary series about empowering women, and everything seemed perfectly choreographed for another softball celebrity interview. Jimmy opened with his usual warmth, complimenting her outfit and making small talk about Los Angeles weather. The audience laughed at his jokes, and Meghan seemed genuinely relaxed, crossing her legs and settling into the familiar rhythm of late-night television promotion. She spoke eloquently about her new project, weaving in her usual talking points about female empowerment and making a difference in the world. It's really about giving women a platform to tell their authentic stories, Meghan explained, her hands gesturing gracefully as she spoke. We're living in a time where authenticity matters more than ever, and I think people are hungry for real, honest conversations about the challenges we face. Jimmy nodded along, seemingly impressed by her passion. The interview was flowing smoothly, hitting all the expected beats of a typical promotional appearance. Meghan discussed her creative process, her hopes for the documentary's impact, and even shared a few lighthearted anecdotes about working with her production team. But then something shifted in Jimmy's demeanor. Those who know his interview style could sense it, that subtle change in his posture, the way his eyes sharpened just slightly, the pause that lasted a beat too long. He leaned forward in his chair, and his next question carried a different weight entirely. "Speaking of authentic stories," Jimmy said, his voice maintaining its friendly tone but with an undertone that made the studio audience unconsciously lean forward, "I have to ask about something that's been circulating online recently. There's been some discussion about your time before the royal family, specifically some business ventures that didn't exactly go as planned." The change in Meghan's expression was almost imperceptible, but the cameras caught it. Her smile remained perfectly in place, but something flickered behind her eyes. A flash of wariness, perhaps even irritation. Her media training kicked in immediately, and she responded with practiced deflection. "Oh, Jimmy, you know how the internet can be," she laughed. But the laugh sounded just a fraction too forced. "People love to create stories where there aren't any. I've always been transparent about my journey and the various projects I've been involved with over the years." Jimmy wasn't backing down. He had clearly done his homework, and this wasn't going to be the usual promotional puff piece that celebrities expect when they appear on late-night shows. The audience could feel the tension building, that electric anticipation that comes when a routine interview suddenly becomes something more substantial. "Right, but I'm talking about something specific. Here," Jimmy continued, his journalist instincts taking over from his comedian persona, "there was this lifestyle blog you ran, and some business partnerships that ended pretty abruptly. Some of your former business partners have been pretty vocal about feeling abandoned when bigger opportunities came along." Meghan's posture stiffened, almost imperceptibly. Her media training was excellent, but she clearly hadn't expected this line of questioning. This was supposed to be a friendly promotional appearance, not an investigative interview. The audience was completely silent now, sensing that they were witnessing something unprecedented. "Jimmy, I think you might be misinformed about some details," Meghan replied, her voice still controlled but with a new edge creeping in. "I've always conducted my business relationships with integrity and professionalism. If there are people who feel differently, that's unfortunate, but it doesn't reflect The reality of those situations. The tension in the studio was palpable now. This wasn't the Meghan Markle that audiences were used to seeing, the perfectly composed, perpetually gracious public figure. Cracks were beginning to show in her polished exterior, and Jimmy seemed to sense that he had struck a nerve. "I'm sure you did," Jimmy said, his tone still conversational but clearly not ready to let this go. "But what about the investors who put money into some of these ventures? There's been some pretty specific allegations about promises that weren't kept, about people who trusted you with significant amounts of money, and then found themselves cut out when things started taking off." Meghan's smile finally faltered completely. The mask was slipping, and for the first time in the interview, the audience was seeing something raw and unfiltered. Her voice took on a sharper quality, the carefully modulated tones of her public speaking persona giving way to something more defensive and pointed. "I think we should focus on why I'm here tonight," she said, attempting to regain control of the conversation. "This documentary series is about uplifting women and creating positive change. I'm not sure why we're dwelling on unsubstantiated claims from years ago, but Jimmy had clearly decided that this was exactly where the conversation needed to go, and the audience was completely captivated by this unexpected turn. What had started as a routine promotional interview was rapidly transforming into something far more explosive, and nobody in that studio had any idea just how dramatic things were about to become. The studio lights seemed to burn hotter as Jimmy leaned back in his chair, clearly prepared to take this confrontation to the next level. He had done his research, and it was obvious that he wasn't going to let Meghan deflect her way out of this conversation. The audience could sense they were witnessing television history in the making. "Look, Meghan," Jimmy said, his voice taking on a more serious tone that his regular viewers rarely heard. "I've got some pretty specific information here. We're talking about Sarah Chen, your former business partner from the wellness brand you launched in 2016. She's been very public about how you promised her equal partnership, took her investment money, and then suddenly cut her out completely. When Netflix came calling with their first deal," Meghan's eyes flashed with genuine anger now, the carefully constructed facade crumbling in real time. Her hands gripped the armrests of her chair, and when she spoke, her voice carried a cold fury that sent chills through the studio audience. "How dare you ambush me with this?" she hissed, leaning forward aggressively. "You invited me here under false pretenses to promote my work, and instead you're dragging up lies and distortions from people who are clearly trying to profit off my name." The transformation was stunning. Gone was the composed, media-trained Duchess. In her place sat someone raw, defensive, and clearly caught off guard by Jimmy's refusal to play by the usual celebrity interview rules. The audience was transfixed, phones discreetly recording what they knew would become viral moments within hours. Jimmy wasn't backing down. If anything, Meghan's aggressive response seemed to energize him further. "These aren't lies, though, are they? We reached out to Sarah Chen before tonight's show. She provided us with contracts, email exchanges, bank records. She showed us text messages where you promised her she'd always be your partner, right up until the day you had your lawyers send her a termination notice. That is a complete misrepresentation of what happened," Meghan snapped, her voice rising loud enough that several audience members visibly startled. "Business relationships evolve, Jimmy. Sometimes partnerships don't work out. That doesn't make me a villain, and it certainly doesn't give you the right to ambush me on national television with one-sided stories from disgruntled former associates." The energy in the studio was electric now. This wasn't just a heated interview anymore. It was becoming a full-scale confrontation between two strong personalities, and neither seemed willing to back down. Jimmy's producers in the control room were frantically signaling, unsure whether to cut to commercial or let this explosive moment continue to unfold. "But here's what's interesting," Jimmy continued, pulling out what appeared to be printed documents. "Sarah isn't the only one. We found 3 other business partners with remarkably similar stories. Maria Rodriguez from your sustainable fashion, Line, David Kim from the meditation app venture, and Rebecca Walsh from your organic food startup. All of them tell the same story. Big promises, initial investment from them, sudden success, and then they're mysteriously bought out or pushed out right before the real money starts rolling in. Meghan's face had gone pale, but her eyes were blazing. She stood up abruptly, towering over Jimmy from her position next to the guest chair. The audience gasped audibly. Guests simply didn't behave this way on late-night television. "This is absolutely unacceptable," she declared, her voice carrying across the silent studio with crystalline clarity. "You've turned what was supposed to be a platform for meaningful discussion about women's empowerment into a character assassination based on the bitter complaints of people who couldn't keep up with my vision and drive." Jimmy remained seated, but his expression had hardened. "Your vision and drive? Or your willingness to step on anyone who helped you get where you are? Because that's what these people are saying, Meghan. They're saying you have a pattern of using people's resources, connections, and trust to build your success, and then discarding them the moment they become inconvenient. That is a disgusting lie." Meghan's voice cracked with fury. She was now pacing behind her chair, her composure completely shattered. "I have spent my entire adult life fighting for justice, for equality, for giving voice to the voiceless. And you're sitting here trying to tear me down with gossip and hearsay from people who clearly have axes to grind." The studio audience was completely silent, absorbing every word of this unprecedented confrontation. Social media was already exploding, with clips and commentary. But inside that studio, time seemed suspended as two powerful personalities clashed in ways that neither had anticipated. Jimmy's response was measured, but devastating. "Fighting for justice? Meghan, we have documentation showing that Maria Rodriguez invested her grandmother's life savings, $47,000, into your fashion line after you personally assured her it was a guaranteed success. 3 months later, she was completely cut out, and that money was gone. Her grandmother died last year, never seeing a penny returned." The words hit Meghan like physical blows. Her pacing stopped, and for a moment something that might have been genuine emotion flickered across her face, but it was quickly replaced by cold rage. "You have no right," she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that somehow carried more menace than her earlier shouting. "You have no right to weaponize people's personal tragedies to attack me. That situation was complex, and there were legal and financial complications that you clearly don't understand." "Then explain them," Jimmy challenged, spreading the documents across his desk. "Explain how 4 different business partners all end up with the same story. Explain how someone who talks constantly about authenticity and female empowerment leaves a trail of women who trusted her completely financially devastated." What happened next would become the most talked-about moment in late-night television history, as Meghan Markle's carefully constructed public image finally cracked completely, revealing something that would shock even her harshest critics. Meghan's face contorted with pure rage as she spun around to face Jimmy directly. The transformation was complete. Gone was any pretense of the gracious, composed public figure. What stood before the stunned audience was someone consumed by fury and desperation. "You want to know the truth, Jimmy?" she snarled, her voice dripping with venom. "The truth is that I don't owe anyone anything. I worked harder than any of those people ever did. I had the vision, I had the connections, I had the drive to make things happen. If they couldn't keep up, if they couldn't handle the pressure of real success, that's their problem, not mine." The studio audience sat in stunned silence, some covering their mouths in shock. This wasn't just an angry celebrity having a meltdown. This was a calculated, cold revelation of someone who had been hiding their true nature behind years of carefully crafted public relations. Jimmy's eyes widened as he realized what was happening. "Are you seriously saying that you feel no responsibility toward the people who trusted you with their life savings?" "Responsibility?" Meghan laughed, but it was a harsh, bitter sound that made several audience members visibly uncomfortable. Jimmy, let me tell you something about responsibility. I was responsible for turning their small-minded, limited ideas into something that could actually make a difference in the world. I was responsible for opening doors they never could have opened themselves. If they were too weak or too stupid to capitalize on the opportunities I created, that's on them. The contempt in her voice was palpable. She was pacing again, but now it was predatory, like a caged animal looking for an escape route. Her hands were gesturing wildly as she spoke, all pretense of media training abandoned. Maria Rodriguez? She wanted to keep everything small, boutique, authentic, Meghan continued, making air quotes with obvious disdain. She had no understanding of scale, no vision for what we could become. I saved her from her own limitations, and instead of thanking me, she whines about money that was never really hers to begin with. Jimmy was leaning forward now, incredulous. Money that was never hers? Meghan, it was her grandmother's life savings. You personally asked her to invest it, and I gave her opportunities she never would have had otherwise. Meghan shot back, her voice reaching a pitch that seemed to echo through the studio. Every single one of those people was nothing before they met me. Nothing. I elevated them. I gave them purpose. I made them relevant. And the moment they couldn't handle the heat of real success, they turned on me. The audience was witnessing something unprecedented. A complete psychological breakdown of one of the world's most famous public figures. Phones were out throughout the studio, capturing every second of this career-ending meltdown. Jimmy tried to regain control of the interview. Meghan, I think you need to step back and listen to what you're saying right now. You're talking about real people who trusted you, who believed in you, and who lost everything because of decisions you made. Oh, spare me the moral lecture, Jimmy, Meghan spat, whirling around to face him with eyes blazing. You think you're some kind of crusading journalist? You're a comedian who makes jokes about celebrities for a living. Don't pretend you understand what it takes to build an empire, what it takes to operate at the level I operate at. She moved closer to his desk, her posture aggressive and intimidating. And don't you dare sit there and judge me when you've never had to make the hard decisions that real leaders make. Every successful person has to leave some people behind. That's not cruelty, that's evolution. Jimmy stood up now, matching her energy. Evolution? Meghan, you're talking about destroying people's lives for your own benefit. That's not evolution, that's sociopathy. The word hung in the air like a bomb that had just exploded. Meghan's face went white, then red, cycling through emotions so quickly that it was almost frightening to watch. When she spoke again, her voice was deadly quiet. "How dare you?" she whispered, but the whisper carried more menace than any shout. "How dare you use that word about me? I have dedicated my life to service, to making the world better, to fighting for people who don't have a voice." "Whose voice?" Jimmy challenged, his own anger finally showing. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've spent your life silencing the voices of anyone who trusted you enough to help you succeed." That was the breaking point. Meghan let out a sound that was part scream, part growl, and swept her arm across Jimmy's desk, sending his water glass, note cards, and the printed documents flying across the studio floor. The audience gasped, and some people actually screamed. "I am done with this," she shouted, her voice cracking with fury. I'm done with your pathetic attempts to tear me down, because you can't handle the fact that I've achieved more in my life than you ever will. I came here as a courtesy, to promote work that actually matters, and you ambushed me with lies and character assassination." She was backing toward the edge of the stage now, her eyes wild, her carefully styled hair disheveled from her aggressive gesturing. "You want to know what your problem is, Jimmy? Your problem is that you can't stand seeing a woman who refuses to apologize for her success, who refuses to make herself smaller to make other people comfortable." Jimmy watched her retreat, his expression a mixture of shock and disgust. "Meghan, Success built on other people's suffering isn't success, it's exploitation. And that, Meghan said, pointing a shaking finger at him, is exactly the kind of small-minded thinking that keeps people mediocre their entire lives. She turned to leave, then spun back around for one final attack. This interview, this whole pathetic attempt to humiliate me, it's going to backfire on you spectacularly. My fans, my real supporters, they know who I am. They know the work I do, and they're going to see this for what it really is. A desperate attempt by a failing talk show host to generate headlines by attacking someone who actually makes a difference in the world. With that, she strode off the stage, her heels clicking loudly against the floor in the dead silence of the studio. As she reached the exit, she turned back one more time. "You'll be hearing from my lawyers," she called out, her voice echoing through the stunned studio. "All of you will." The stage door slammed behind her with a resounding bang that seemed to snap the audience out of their trance. Jimmy stood alone, at his desk, surrounded by scattered papers and broken glass, staring at the door through which one of the world's most famous women had just made what would undoubtedly be remembered as one of the most spectacular exits in television history. The audience sat in complete silence for several long seconds before someone began to clap slowly. Then others joined in, building to thunderous applause not for Meghan, but for Jimmy's refusal to let her escape accountability. As the cameras finally cut away, Jimmy looked directly into the lens and said simply, "Well, folks, I guess that's what happens when you ask someone to be authentic." The audience erupted again, and television history was made.